So I am here preparing some canvases and paper with a colored ground so that I can paint on top of them. In this case I have a piece of Fabriano, I think it's 300-gram paper, quite thick with a nice tooth on it, that I've isolated the paper with some golden gesso, several coats, and then sanded down to get a nice fairly smooth surface. I can still see a little bit of the tooth of the paper. But it would be the same process with a piece of canvas that you would have taped to the board or on a stretcher. I'm going to put on a colored ground, what we call a Campitura. The first layer of priming would be called the imprimatura, and the second colored layer can be called the Campitura. In this case, I'm putting on the colored ground, the Campitura. That's just the Italian word for field color. A campo is a field in Italian, so putting on this field color. In this case, it's going to be the kind of 2 to 3 value gray that they used in the 19th century in many paintings. In the 19th century, they shifted away from that kind of golden brown of the old masters, that darker brown field color, into lighter field colors. And in the 20th century, actually, they moved into experimenting with blues and yellows and actual primary colors with the grounds. But for a large part of the 19th century, you'll see these lighter gray grounds. So you can use just strictly oil paint for this. I've had some mixed up here already. And then some raw umber and some ivory black, just to balance the coolness and warmth. What I like to use is a specifically made painting primer. This painting primer from Winsor & Newton is really good. It's basically oil paint with an alkyd resin, and it's got a wonderful texture. You just scoop some out. It's kind of got the texture of thick oil paint. You don't need to thin this down with anything. And then next to it here is the kind of color I'm going for. So you could use white oil paint. I wouldn't use titanium because it's a very slow drying, although you could with some, say, adding some liquid or even cobalt dryer, but I would say more lead white would be better. It's a better under painting paint. It's very solid, it dries fast, and it helps colors on top of it dry faster as well. So that's what I would use, with a little bit of a, like I said, a resin dryer like alkyd liquid medium or cobalt dryer to help it dry. In this case, it's already got the alkyd resin in it. So you can see it's kind of got this thickish texture to it. So I want it to be a bit on the warm side, so I'll start with my raw umber. Maybe a tiny bit of black. So just kind of comparing it to what I've been doing. I'm going to go a little bit warmer on this one. So less black, a little more raw umber. Plus by the time I mix all this in, it will cool it down as well. And you want to test it out on the ground too, because it will look different on the ground than it does on the actual canvas. Sorry, it will look different on the ground than it does on the palette, which is quite dark. All right. And you can always add more if you need to lighten it or whatnot, or need more of it. So let's go with that color. wouldn't put on too thick. You want to spread it fairly thin. Unless you like the texture, then you can. It's quite thick, so it's got a really nice tooth to it when it dries. So the main purpose of these colored grounds is to cut the whiteness of the canvas, right, or the paper, so that you have a field color, in a sense, that is contributing to the overall final look of the painting, and also giving an atmosphere for the paint to exist in. So just putting, say, a single stroke on a white ground can be quite, it can look quite stark. So if you're working just on white canvas, you definitely want to cover it quickly with the colors. But the whole idea of these field colors is to give an overall feeling to the painting. So if you think of old master golden browns and what the paintings look like, versus more of these 19th century painters, which shifted from this kind of, from the more kind of traditional single light source to a very not multi-directional, but more pervasive lighting where the shadows are very soft. Just taking out some of these pieces of brush that have fallen off. You can also get rid of these with a light sanding afterwards. So if you can find some high-res reproductions of paintings and look towards the edge, or sometimes you'll see unpainted sections, the ground peeking through, you'll be able to see what the color was. Okay.